Alan, do you think that the public are being coerced to buy electric vehicles?
I think what's happening is we've got an assault across a number of levels. So you have some incentives and then you have some impositions. And I think the problem is, firstly, there's a question of cost. It has come down. There's some better technology. But then you've got the issue of what happens with the batteries, the weight of the cars, the impacts on the roads, the impacts on car parks, the resale values in the second-hand market, the length of duration of the batteries. But the key question that we're being told is that, and it's just been said again, that it's greener and it's better. But it actually, I think you have to assess how these things are made. The idea that you don't use carbon when you make an electric car is preposterous. You know, how do things get made with steel and copper and with turbines and creating a situation where you have cobalt, where you have mining with children? The whole process of doing it involves all sorts of carbon, and let's use that term, a footprint. The question is, as well, is that when we look at what's been happening with transport policy in terms of this question of are we being coerced, we've had all sorts of measures, not just ULEZ, low emission zones, low traffic neighbourhoods, roadblocks, CCTV surveillance, where car drivers are being forced to do certain things. It's not through choice. Final point on this, just the final point. Fiat has suspended now making electric cars. And even though there was a little bit of a spike temporarily across the sector, the economists and others are all reporting it's sluggish. People do not want to purchase these cars.
OK, thank you. Now, Donica, what Alan's saying there essentially is the state is intervening in what should be a market forces issue. Is that right? Labour's brought forward the date when they're going to ban sales of new petrol vehicles to 2030 from 2035 under the Tory party. Is that the point? Why, if the state gets involved in markets, it always goes wrong?
Well, I actually think the fact that actually the state action at the moment, it's a Tory policy which is being implemented by the current government, is bringing down the cost of EV cars for poor drivers. EV cars are cheaper to run, according to the Automobile Association. So that's a good, surely, Christopher. And secondly, I do agree with Ben's point. Yes, EV cars are polluting to make. All cars are polluting to make. But the EV cars are a third of the pollution of fossil fuel cars. So it's a step in the right direction. Personally, people like me see a lot of people across the United Kingdom poor people were forced to actually buy cars by the state because the state slashed the bus network for poorer rural people by 50%. The rural poor have been hammered and forced to buy cars by the destruction of the bus service. And secondly, poor people were forced to buy cars because the price of trains went through the roof because the government put in above inflation fare increases. So yes, I think the state needs to act. It needs to stop forcing poor people into poverty and enable them to use public transport at a cheap price for them. And also to access for the rural poor cheaper EV cars because they're cheaper and cleaner to run.
Alan, last point to you. We're running out of time, but those are some valid points there, aren't there, from Donica?
So very important questions. I think we have to have investment in infrastructure, public transport. We've seen with Labour councillors as well as Conservative that what they've done is they've also slashed the transport. They've made these fines, these measures, these impositions, but have not done that. Just remember, we're losing 6,000 jobs across Port Talbot and Scunthorpe because of net zero goals and objectives. We've got situations where Tata and others, British Steel, can no longer be made here as a consequence of these objectives that are making us poorer, colder, and could potentially have blackouts. This is the agenda that's also driving what's happening with our automobiles, and it's going to be very problematic for the British public.